So earlier today, the Packers made another move that I think has been in alignment with every other move and all the different moves they made this offseason ever since the Packers decided to part ways with Aaron Rodgers. And so, of course, earlier today, most of you may have heard that the Packers did decide to go with a young punter and Daniel Whalen instead of keeping the veteran in Pat O'Donnell. And that is something that we have seen the Packers do. We have seen Brian Gutekunst do since they decided to trade away Aaron Rodgers. There's no doubt that, moving on to Jordan Love really started the domino effects that affected the entire roster. And I'll just throw up here some of the guys we've moved on from and the guys who have sort of filled their place. Rodgers, of course, to Jordan Love. Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb to Watson, Dobbs, and Reed. Mercedes Lewis and Robert Tonyan at tight end to Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft at tight end. Jaron Reed and Dean Lowry, two veteran guys, to TJ Slaton and Devontae Wyatt, two younger players. Adrian Amos to Rudy Ford, most likely. Mason Crosby to Anders Carlson, and now Pat O'Donnell to Daniel Whalen. And so I think Brian Gutekunst, ever since he drafted Jordan Love in 2020, had to have some kind of idea of what it would look like when he eventually moved on from Aaron Rodgers, because I just think that with Brian Gutekunst trading up for Jordan Love in that 2020 draft, he really, I think, linked himself to Jordan Love in a big way. And with Rodgers getting up there in age, I think that he knew that at some point they were going to cut ties, whether that was Rodgers retiring, whether that was a trade occurring. I think Brian Gutekunst knew that this was going to happen, and maybe he knew that it was going to happen this season. I think that if you look to the last season, some comments made from Rodgers in interviews, it sounded like Rodgers wasn't sold that the Packers wanted him back the next season, even though they had just given him the big contract extension before the season. And I think that the Packers had an idea before 2022 that they could still potentially have a Super Bowl contender. Of course, that didn't quite go to plan, only going 8-9. So many different things I think led to that. One of the biggest ones being Devontae Adams leaving. And Brian Gutekunst, after that season, made the decision to say, you know what, okay, we're going to move on and implement the plan and decide to go with the young guy in Jordan Love. And what Brian Gutekunst has done so far, and honestly the past couple of years, has me very excited for the roster, not only this season, but also in 2024, 2025. And basically what Packers GM Brian Gutekunst has been able to do is accumulate a ton of draft capital, and which have then turned into a ton of young prospects. We look back to, first of all, trading Devontae Adams, which I know the Packers didn't really want to do that. Reports were that the Packers offered Devontae more than he ended up getting in Las Vegas. And so clearly Devontae wanted to leave Green Bay, wanted to go to Las Vegas. But in that trade, we get a first and second round pick, which then leads to, drafting Devontae Wyatt and Quay Walker in the round one, and then using our two second round picks in 2022 to move up and draft Christian Watson. And so that Devontae trade, led us to get a guy in Christian Watson who maybe we wouldn't have gotten if Devontae had stayed. And then now you throw in the Aaron Rodgers trade where we get the second round pick, which led to, we get Musgrave and Reed. So one of those guys is added here because of the Rodgers trade. And then you look now at the first round pick we should get, because if Rodgers plays 65% of snaps, the Packers will have 2 first round picks in 2024. And so just looking at this roster now, we have so much young talent here on offense and on defense. And then you throw in the fact that the Packers should have 2 first round picks in 2024. And this is just such a highly talented young team with, I think, an insane amount of upside. And the one common thread has been that Brian Gutekunst did not want to hold on to these veteran guys who maybe aren't still playing at the highest level. He wanted to instead give these young players a ton of snaps in 2023. And I think in Brian Gutekunst's mind, I think that he, with the talent here, I think that he thinks this could be a competitive team. But at the same time, he has to be at least aware of the possibility that because it is such a young team, that there probably will be some hiccups that maybe you wouldn't have experienced if you would have kept a guy like a Mercedes Lewis, Robert Tonyan. Maybe they wouldn't make those rookie kind of mistakes, but they're definitely not going to make the kind of plays that Musgrave will make, at least when it comes to being a receiver, when it comes to after the catch. And so I think that, Gutekunst is willing to sacrifice a little bit of safety. And it's not necessarily safety, because I honestly think that this roster here is almost safer in a sense, because I think they have more talent than lots of the guys who were here before. But Brian Gutekunst is willing to take this year in 2023 to give these guys a ton of reps, which will lead to them being so much farther ahead in 2024 and 2025. And so I do think this is a roster that is going to be very competitive even in 2023. Of course, lots of it comes down to Jordan Love, but I think the Packers have surrounded him with a very, very elite offensive line. They've surrounded him with tons of top-tier talent, tons of young talent, Watson, Dobbs, Reed, Luke Musgrave, lots of guys who are going to develop with Jordan Love. And if we look at this season, however this season goes, I think next season is going to be much, much better because we're probably not going to lose many guys next year. It's probably going to be a very similar group to this season. Then you throw in 2 more first-round picks next year. And in 2024 and 2025, the Packers have the chance to have one of the most explosive offenses, one of the most, talented young teams with very cheap contracts, with tons of guys on rookie deals, with also the ability of maybe going and signing some free agents, signing some top-tier players next offseason, the next offseason after that, to fill some holes that if maybe, some of these draft picks don't hit, because the odds of every single draft pick hitting, not super high. Some guys may not live up to the expectation that the Packers maybe had in drafting these guys. But in 2024, next season, we're going to have more money to go in there and fill holes in free agency. And so I really do love what Brian Gutekunst has done with his team. I think that he has been a very, very solid GM ever since he came here to Green Bay back in 2018. The Packers have consistently been, one of the most competitive teams in the NFL for years and years, largely due to Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, and so obviously lots of it does come down to Jordan Love. But Brian Gutekunst, I think, has done as good a job as possible when it comes to creating a roster here that I think can be competitive in 2023, but then has a chance to be one of the best in 2024 and 2025. So me personally, I love what he has done. I would love to hear what you guys think about how the Packers have really moved on since Rodgers, the moves that Brian Gutekunst has made since that happened. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section down below. But that is it, all I have for this one, and I'll see you guys next time.